thanks, Norm, for the opportunity to be part of this process and this project. It's actually really quite exciting. My initial first reaction was scepticism, I'll admit that, thinking how can we turn food waste into a highly efficient and consistent product for the poultry industry. But the more I got involved in it, the more exciting it's become, and there's real optimism and real opportunities here and real possibilities, I think, that makes it something that's really, really worth pursuing. So thank you for that. I also thank you for putting a chicken on the board. I think that's really important because the chickens need to have a voice in this. Okay, it's no good
producing. Won't make it any harder than manage the board now.
Keeps laying those golden eggs.
Because the chooks need to have a voice in this, because this is it's no good producing pellets at the end of that process down there and having nowhere to put them, or no life or no future for them. To get them out to the chook farm and actually make something out of them. So it is really important to make sure the end user is able to utilise this product. What I'll do is give you a brief rundown on both of the industries. It was mentioned this morning, I think Bob mentioned it also, that layers and broilers they're different as beef cows and dairy cows. Right? Yep, they're both chooks, but they are so different. I'll talk about both industries briefly so that you can have an understanding on where this is all going to go at the end of the day, how it's going to get into a silo. Egg industry first up. We've seen some numbers today, and I'll show you some more numbers on that, but the egg industry first up. Annual production of 6.2 billion eggs. Pretty damn amazing. When you multiply it out, that's a lot of eggs. Each of us is eating 244 eggs per year on average. Okay? Massive. Sorry?
And loving it.
And loving it, yeah. It's now been proven that it's healthy for us. We went through a few years where it was going to be a problem for your cholesterol, and we were down to 1 egg a day from CSIRO's recommendations and all that sort of thing. Now being demonstrated that eggs are a good nutritious food, and I think we can have, I don't know how many it is, as many as you like. You can also see here that not only is it big now, but it's expected to grow hugely. Just exponential growth. These figures were also done pre-ASF. Okay, ASF has changed the whole picture. 25% of the world's pigs out of production, 50% of China's pigs out of production. That's a huge amount of protein that has to be taken up somewhere else. Okay, so those figures there, I have no idea where they're going to be. It would only be speculating, but obviously chicken meat and eggs is an obvious replacement. Okay, so these figures are just going to skyrocket, I do believe. So we're looking at producing 120% growth over 35 years. That's up to 2050. Could be more than that, 150, 200% production growth. So the potential is enormous, and obviously feed production or feed consumption of those birds is going to exponentially increase also. So where is that growth? I can't use that on here. There we go. Where's that growth? These are figures out of the Australian Eggs annual report for last year. So in 2018, number of chickens in the Australian flock. So that's what's eating it. You can see the massive growth already, from 19.5 million up to almost 22 million. Now that's birds in lay. There's also a whole 6 months of birds coming through to be those layers. So the actual Australian flock of layer hens is about 27, 28 million birds at any one time, with that replacement of an annual basis of 5 or 6 million. Okay, so there's huge intake. Each of those hens is eating 105 to 110 grams a day in production. Okay, so we've multiplied the numbers out to show you what sort of numbers we're actually talking about. This is the other interesting perspective. 100% production in 2014. We had about 9%, which is called barn laid. So that's the birds that are free running in sheds, which was the next step on from cage production. You can see cage production is about 50%, roughly 52, 54% in 2014. Now it's down to 42%. It's dropping, okay, more and more rapidly. And it's not at the expense of barn production or what we call specialty. So this is the backyards, the little niche ones, the little caravans that are out in all the peri-urban areas. Okay, it's at the expense of cage production. So free range production has gone up by 10% over the 4 years. Cage production has gone down. And in fact, the most recent figures that I pulled out, and I'll come back to that one, The most recent figures we pulled out is that cage production's actually reduced over the last 12 months. So you can see that the whole production system of the egg industry is changing rapidly. It's changing to free range and specialty eggs. Now just keep specialty eggs in mind, because that's where I've sort of been twigging Norm's mind about where we might be able to go in this. Okay, so caged eggs are on the way out. There's no regulations yet to say that cages are banned, even though New South Wales has actually just put a recommendation to Parliament that cage production should be banned. So no, it's still in limbo at the moment. But there are no regulations. There's standard and guidelines for welfare, but currently being drafted and redrafted and out for consultation, and we don't know if it'll ever come to fruition. I guess it will at some point. Alison's sitting there smiling, going, "Yeah, no, that's the process." So cages are not yet banned, but what cages are doing is not being built. There's a natural loss of cage production because no one's willing to invest in cages. Okay, millions of dollars investment goes into producing a cage facility. When there's no assurance that your cages are going to be productive in 5 years' time, no one's going to invest in it, and the banks aren't going to lend on that sort of thing. Okay, so there's a natural loss of the cage industry. There will probably always be a small one because there will be a market for them. This is all market driven. It's not driven by the producers. It's driven by the retailers and driven by consumers. Okay, selection for eggs on the supermarket shelf. So that's what the driver is for this. So naturally, cage eggs are going to be dropping off over time. Specialty eggs and free-range eggs will be the direction of the future. There's another huge market there as well called backyard chooks. We don't know how many backyard chickens are out there. We're guessing about 1 million. We can only guess that on the amount of spent hen sales and chick sales out of hatcheries to backyard people. A real guesstimate. But again, that's a growing industry, and it is a niche industry that would love this. Okay? Food recycling has got such good social connotations to it. Okay? It's a real winner for consumers. Okay, so that's an area. Now, when I say backyard, there's probably backyard and specialty. Okay, there's small operators that produce, and I'll get onto it later, niche eggs and niche markets. So there's opportunities there. Now, the cage industry, the layer industry, I've highlighted that. The layer industry is pretty much, there's two segments. There's the large producers, there's the Pace Farms, there's the Sunny Queens, there's the Farm Prides and these sort of things. And they're large conglomerates, okay, centrally managed contract farms, and they actually are a vertically integrated operation. There's also this large percentage of independent operators. Okay, now the Farm Prides and the Paces, and talking nutrition now, and the Sunny Queens, they generally have their own nutritionists, they have their own feed mills, they have their own procurement systems, they basically run the whole systems internally. Okay, the growers aren't out there buying feed. Okay, they're all not given their feed, but they are delivered the feed that the company decides that they will get. Okay, so it's pretty much taken out of the farmer's hands what feed he can buy or what feed he can access. But you've also got this large percentage of growers out there who are independent, totally independent, and they're in the open market, and they're the people that people like Lynn here are supplying feed to. Okay, independent operators supplied by the independent feed manufacturers, the Ridleys, the Westerns, the Riverinas. There's quite a few. I don't know how many independent feed manufacturers are out there, but quite a lot. Okay, so what I'm probably suggesting is that those corporation type ones, they're mainstream. They're looking for high volume and they're looking for consistency. They've got their own procurement teams. They've got their own supply chain of feed going through all the time. They're probably not the people that are going to be looking at this market unless what they do is have their own little niche sub-markets. Okay, they can see a target of an organic egg market and they will set up a little organic operation. Maybe they'll have something like that in their operation, right? But that's not, I don't think initially from my personal perspective where you get the foot in the door is with the major producers, is to find the independents, the niche people that are willing to sort of take this chance and put something on their label that says this is from recycled food and get the social license, get the social benefit, get the consumer benefit from it. So there's Mrs. Hen there. She'll produce this many eggs in her lifetime. Okay, she's a high producing bird This comes back to Bob's comments about his nutrition. Okay, we have to get that nutrition exactly right because we expect her to produce those 350 eggs. Okay, feed is the biggest cost of production for both broilers and layers. And you saw Bob's formulations there. He's down to 4 decimal points. Did you see that? How detailed is that? Okay, and that's not just because the system puts in 4 decimal places. That's what they're looking at. Okay, we've got to get it fine-tuned to that extent. All right. So that's where we're looking at these products, we look at this end product and we say, is that going to meet all of those requirements? And Bob's saying he's pulling in different ingredients and then throwing limestone, not throwing, sorry, Bob, I shouldn't say that. Adding limestone, adding other ingredients, adding vitamins and minerals to bring it up to that very, very fine-tuned nutritional profile requirement. Okay? That's where my initial scepticism was when I looked at this and I thought, well, are we producing an ingredient that Bob can call into his rations to formulate a feed? Or are we going to produce an end product feed? Right, 2 different concepts we need to think about. And I think we're still at the point that both options are on the table. Depends how you want to sort of set up the final system that you can bring all these other ingredients in to produce this finely formulated ration. Okay, so that's where we need to think about this. Each hen, 105 to 112 grams per day. So she eats about over 50 kilos in her lifetime, 14 million tonnes per annum. So that figure that we saw, the 850,000 tonnes, that was from a 2016, I think, annual report. I actually did the sums on the latest figures with the latest hen numbers and this sort of thing. We come up to more like just 1.4, sorry, not 14, 1.4 million tonnes per annum. Okay, and it's on the way up. What sort of feed do we feed hens? There's mash feed, crumble feed and pelleted feed. So we've heard comments about all 3 today. Bob said no, most layers do get mash feed. That's got biosecurity implications these days. Salmonella enteritis is a real problem for the poultry, for the layer industry right at this point in time. We've had an outbreak in New South Wales this year. And so there's going to be pressure on producers to go away from a mash feed, which may well carry salmonella and has no control steps in the process, towards a pelleted feed. Because pelleting itself is a heat process and it does kill salmonella. Okay? New South Wales control orders are put in place. Other states are looking at different accreditation requirements to ensure that salmonella is not feed is not a salmonella risk. Heat treatment is one of those control factors. Right? So there will be pressure going away from mash feed towards feeding a pelleted feed. Crumble feed is simply a pelleted feed that's broken down to smaller portions for younger birds or for more consistent feed consumption. Okay, so they're the 3 different forms. You're right, mash feed is probably the most common form now, but it's not necessarily going to be the way going forward. All right, chicken meat industry. 660 million broiler chickens per annum, 1.238 thousand tonnes of chicken meat per annum produced in Australia. Now there is a small free range industry in Australia too. That hasn't sort of taken off as much as the intensive meat chickens to this point, but I can give you a heads up that it will, because the retailers are going that way. Okay, they're pushing more and more free range into the marketplace because they see opportunities with it. So the industry itself, even though it's 15% now and it's sort of been slow to take off, that is going to take off big time. Okay, so that's where the chicken meat industry is moving, and it's driven largely by the retailers. Okay, that's a market opportunity they're seeing. Most of our consumption is domestic. Anything that goes overseas is generally in a box and being cooked and crumbed and further processed, and bits of cheese and all sorts of stuff and herbs and spices, all that sort of stuff. So it's further processed type product which heads overseas. There's a little bit of what we call surplus product, gets frozen and sent into the Pacific Islands and those sort of places that don't have their own industries. Australia finds it hard to compete on price with countries like Thailand and Brazil because of our labour costs. So they are more likely to be exporting products into our markets than what we can do because of price disparities. So most of it's been consumed domestically. We're each eating about 48.8 kilos per annum. So each one of us is eating 23, 24 chickens per year, except the vegans amongst us. We'll make up for you. So yeah, consumption is just massive. Again, the 1% growth, that's in consumption, not in production. ASF might change all that again. We just don't know where that's going to lead us. But our consumption is continuing to grow. Chicken meat is seen as obviously a staple diet now. I know when I was a child, Christmas dinner was the only time we had our chicken. It was a luxury item. We get roast chicken once a year. But now, 2-3 times a week, plus a number of times you probably don't realise where you just have a bit of takeaway or a restaurant meal and there's chicken involved in it somewhere. So it's really a staple diet now. Typical broiler chicken, totally different to the layer hen. Okay, one of these chickens, as a day-old chicken, will grow up to 5 times its own body weight in the first 7 days of life. Quite incredible. 40-gram chicken can be 180, 190 grams after 7 days. Imagine the nutrition that's required for that. Okay, this is high-end science. This is highly technical stuff.
What you should mention is no hormones.
No hormones in chickens? Absolutely. I could have a whole story about that. The last hormones were used in about 1960. And that was an offshoot from the layer industry. I can give you a quick rundown on that. The layer industry back in the 60s had all these surplus male chickens that they had no use for. So they were what we call capernised. They got an estradiol implant and they were fattened up and sold off as that Christmas dinner. Okay, but from that point on, we realised that there was 2 different industries. There was a layer industry and a meat industry, an opportunity for meat chickens. And so the breeding companies started diverging and started to produce a meat chicken. Okay, so from the 1960s, there's been no hormones used in poultry whatsoever. Unfortunately, it's taken more than a generation to get that message out there. I don't know why that is. 1.45, so do you know what FCR is, or a feed conversion ratio? That essentially means that it takes 1.45 kilos of chicken feed to produce 1 kilo of chicken. Okay, I think that's only bettered by the aquaculture industry.
Tilapia.
Yeah, sorry, tilapia?
Yeah. Virtually 1-to-1.
1-to-1, yeah. Okay, so that's the best terrestrial result you can get. I had a nutritionist on the phone to me this morning, said she was crying with happiness yesterday because she achieved that for the first time in her company. Very, very excited by that because that's a sort of a gold standard that you can achieve. So that is actually happening. That's not pipe dream stuff. That's where we're at the moment with chicken meat. Typical broiler ration. Now Bob's given you all this, so I don't need to really go into any great detail about this. Very, very basic breakdown of it. The important thing that, as Bob was saying, we don't talk about crude protein anymore with nutrition. Okay, that's gone out with the dinosaurs. We don't talk about metabolisable energy. We're starting to talk about net energy. We're starting to talk about amino acids and amino acid balances and amino acid profiles and essential amino acids, and it's just we're now dealing with much finer detail, down to the 0.01% sort of detail. Okay, highly scientific. Nutritionists, I believe, are probably the smartest people out. It's such a confusing process to try and understand all the ramifications and the interactions between different ingredients and the non-nutritional factors and each load of grain can have a different protein level to the next load of grain, and it is a real complicated system to be able to produce a diet for a broiler chicken or a layer chicken. But we have the basics to work to. Each nutritionist has their own what we call matrix. That's their IP. Okay, so Lynn has got a different matrix probably to what Bob has for soybean. Okay, so she's got a different understanding of what soybean does, and that's Lynn's intellectual property. Okay, and her performance in the broiler field or in the layer field is dependent on how good her matrix is. Okay, so that's confidential secrets that these guys have, and they don't release that. Even after a few red wines, they don't release that. All right, so I'm saying it's really a fine-tuned game. Not a game, sorry, I shouldn't say it's a game, should I? It's a science. Okay, so a broiler, each one in its life will eat over 4 kilos of feed. So we're now talking 3 million tonnes per annum of chicken feed. Remember, there's also breeding stock. So we've got 440 million, whatever it was, 660 million broilers a year. Also got a lot of breeders out there to produce the eggs to produce those broilers. So there's a huge number of birds out there as well, and they're eating 150 grams a day. They eat more than what a layer hen does. So huge market in feed. Okay, so the feed industry. This is getting into the feed side of things. Vertical integration in the large enterprises. So the broiler industry, similar to the layer industry, we've got Ingham's, we've got Baiada, are the two majors. They've got about 80% of the market. And then we've got the second tier ones, which is Golden Cockerel, Cordina, Hazeldene's, Chirosi. I think they're the four main ones, which are second tiers, and they've probably got about 15% of the market combined. And then we've got the smaller organics and the little smaller operators. Now, similarly to the layer guys, anyone that's growing meat chickens will have a contract with a processor. You can't grow meat chickens and then just go out to the local sale yards and sell your chickens. We don't do that. Okay, they're all grown under contract. Generally, the processor controls everything, including the feed. Okay, so the grower is not going out there buying feed. The grower has delivered the feed that the processor wants delivered. Okay, the processor has all the control over the purchasing of the feed, the ingredients, the feed manufacturing processes, delivery process, all that sort of thing is fully integrated within the processor. And that's right down through the second tier groups as well. So there's not a lot of broiler farms out there that will go out there and go to Lynn and say, I need broiler starter feed, if they're a commercial operator.
It's only small boutique ones.
Small boutique ones, yeah. Okay, and the backyarders. And again, there's not a lot of backyard broiler chickens. These broiler chickens are not suitable as pets. Layer chickens are, right? They'll live for a couple of years and they'll give you the eggs every day and the kids can play with them, whatever, because they survive. Broiler chickens don't survive like that. They're designed to grow. Okay? They will get to a point where they'll just get overweight, they'll get down on their legs, they'll have skeletal problems, they'll have cardiovascular problems, and overweight and fat, and they'll end up dying. Right? They're a machine to grow, they're not a machine, they're not a pet. Okay, so there's no backyard broiler industry, I guess you'd call it, as like there is a backyard layer industry. So there's probably not a lot of opportunity for this sort of business to get into the broiler industry, mainstream broiler industry, into the boutiques, quite possibly. Okay, and I want to talk about those boutiques as well. Industry expectations. Right, this is what we expect out of our feed suppliers. Consistent quality and nutritional profile. So Bob's spoken quite well about that. It is very, very important. There's a whole pipeline of chickens going through. We've got chickens being processed today, right? They're 35 days of age. We've got chickens that were placed today that will be processed in 35 days. They've got to be there. If we have poor quality feed and they're 100 grams too light, they're not good for processing. We've got to have them growing at the same rate every day so that we've always got chickens coming through that processing plant. So consistency is number 1, 2 and 3 priority for the broiler industry. The profile, as long as the profile doesn't change, we can get that consistency. But we can't have inconsistent profiles of nutrition. We can't have 19% protein going out today, 22% tomorrow, 17% the next day. It's just not going to work. All right, so we've got to have the same feed all the time. Reliable supply, so we want to be able to get the feed when we need it. Most of the broiler farms, or pretty much all of the broiler farms, will take bulk feed, and they'll get 20-tonne loads, 24-tonne loads, whatever the truck can take. Could be 30-tonne, 40-tonne if they're taking B doubles, okay, and what their silo capacity is on farm. It's all bulk feed deliveries. Most of the major layer operators would also have bulk feed deliveries. That's why I asked the question of Brendan earlier, how are we going to get this feed from the end of that line there into the silo or into the chickens? It's an important part of the process. Okay, the bag feed is really good for the smaller operators, the independent guys that don't have bulk feeding facilities. Certainly that's a good opportunity, but you do have to look at being able to bulk it up if we're going to the larger operators. Because their silo systems are designed for bulk feed deliveries, they're not designed for handling bags of feed. Okay, so we've got to sort of incorporate that into the system as well. Cost effectiveness, obviously. Feed cost is the biggest single cost. We saw the feed conversion ratios. We go down to 0.3, 3 decimal points to look at our feed conversion ratios. It is the biggest cost. Okay, if we can pick up 0.1%, 0.2% in performance, that's a big thing to us. We're talking to Andrew about aeroplanes, with the Airbuses. what was it, the fuel, lowering the fuel burn. That's exactly what we need to do in chickens, lower that fuel burn, because that's where the cost is to them. Okay? And when I say cost effective, it doesn't have to be the cheapest feed, it's the most optimal feed. And generally feed is costed on a protein ratio. And I was asking Bob how we get cost parity. Okay? So we can pay less for a lower protein feed, but it's at parity. So 18% protein in this feed and 20% protein in this feed, we expect to pay 20% more for that feed. Okay, we buy it on protein. It's got to be wholesome. Now, what does wholesome mean? Wholesome means healthy for the chicken. Also, healthy for us. Okay, those chickens are being fed today, are being processed tomorrow, and in our kitchen the next day. We don't have time for antibiotics to be taken out of the system. We don't have time for any sort of detrimental pathogens in these chickens when they're growing. If they're going to be in our kitchen, on our tables in 2 days' time. We've got to be very, very careful about the wholesomeness, and it's, as a veterinarian, that's it is your number one consideration. Whenever we're thinking about a treatment or a protocol for a flock, what's it going to do to the wholesomeness of that product out the door? Same with the layers. We medicate a layer flock today, they're producing eggs tomorrow. We don't want that producer to have to put 14 days of eggs into the bin because of a withholding period. Okay, we can't have residues, we can't have this sort of thing. So again, we've got this product here. What's going in, is that going to come out? Okay, do we know there's chemicals on the veggies? Do we know there's antibiotics in that meat that's being produced? That's not necessarily registered for poultry, right? These are really important considerations, and Ron's getting that really, really well covered. I've mentioned that most broiler farming is contracted to a processor, so I've just mentioned that. Layer industry, I spoke about this earlier, many independent operators, consistent quality and nutritional profile, so that everything's pretty much the same there, except you've got more independent operators out there in the layer industry than what you've got in the chicken meat industry. Niche markets. Now this is interesting because I think this is where our recycled food has got an opportunity to get its foot in the door and get a name. Okay, it's got to get that public profile, and people have got to start wanting and looking for the recycled food eggs in the supermarket. Okay, that's where you get your name up. I'll just go flick onto this. Right, I went onto the Coles online shopping website 2 nights ago when I was doing this. There was 32 individual choices of eggs, and there was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 different types in that 32. Okay, so we had cage eggs, cage-free eggs, barn-laid eggs, Liberty cage-free, I don't know what they are, RSPCA approved free range natural living, organic free range, vegetarian and eco-organic. Wouldn't it be nice to have down on the bottom here, food recycled? Right? Now these, when I say these are niche products and boutique products, these aren't just the little caravans. Which one is it? This one here, Liberty Eggs. That's Pace Farms. He's the biggest producer of eggs in Australia. He sees an opportunity for a niche. Okay, goes there. Sunny Queen, second biggest operator in Australia, found a niche, targeted it. So they've got farms out there that will produce organic eggs, okay, and get marketed as organic. But it's not the little guys, it's the major producers are getting into this market as well. Okay, so it's not, there's volume out there. Okay, and if you get into these sort of markets and they get into the Coles supermarkets, that's where the volumes build and grow. Okay, that's where the market is. Consumers love it. Food Recycler's got the best social licence, I think, of anything for consumers, because we're all concerned about feed wastage, we're all concerned about price, we're all concerned about the environment, greenhouse gases and wastage of food, all this sort of thing. This answers all of those questions. Right, so it's the way to go, I believe, is to target these sort of things initially until it becomes mainstream. I didn't look at the chicken meat side, but those of you in New South Wales, in Sydney, may have seen a new broiler in the market just recently. It's called the slow growing broiler. Have any of you seen that? Anyone shops for special broiler chickens? Okay, so there's this new chicken now. I think Bayard has just started putting it into the marketplace in the last 3 or 4 weeks. Okay, it's called a slow growing broiler because there's been consumer concerns about the speed of the broiler growth, as you know. So the breeding companies have produced this broiler It's a slower bird, requires different nutrients, different profile. Imagine if you've got a slow-growing, food recycled broiler into the marketplace. Right? Opportunity. Opportunity's knocking in these sort of areas. Okay? That slow-growing broiler is now going to be... It takes a while to get this thing through the pipeline to the whole of Australia. So Sydney's being used as a bit of a test case, but it is at the commercial levels where they can supply this product into the marketplace consistently. So that's the sort of opportunities that I think food recycling can really hit home. So these are the sort of things that are out there now. No like-for-like feeding, so that's... Some of the major retailers don't like us putting poultry offal meal back into poultry diets. Not everyone, so that's not a regulation that still can be done, but it's a personal choice, it's a retailer choice. Antibiotic-free diets starting to be presented. No antibiotics ever, NAE, that's very big in the US. It's coming to Australia. Veggie diets, I don't know why you want to put chickens on vegetable diets because chickens are omnivores, but people believe that vegetarian chickens are healthier or better for you or taste better or something than chickens that eat meat. Okay, another little niche market because there's a market out there for it. Organic diets, so there's certainly a lot of organic chickens out there. Enriched diets, in the layer industry for example, you can have omega-3 eggs which have got higher levels of omega-3 which is good for your heart, so marketing opportunities. It's not hard to change these things, you can just change the diet and in 3 weeks time you've got omega-3 eggs. Is that right, Bob? Is that how it pretty much happens? Can happen? Okay, so there's opportunities to chop and change these things. And feed from recycled food, so that's another niche market. And I think you won't get mainstream until you get to that niche point, and that's what's happened with most of the products that you see up there. The free range, for example, was 5 years ago, was niche. Now it's mainstream. Okay, so that's where the industry goes if you get consumer preference for it. ASF, so I've had some comments about ASF as well. It's been touched on well by Ron. Huge drop in stock feed demand, so all those pigs that aren't out there, there's all that spare stock feed. Okay, is that going to drop the price of our stock feed? Possibly not. We've still got, I don't know how many billion Chinese there are, right? They still need to eat, right now, not when we produce more chickens. What are they going to eat? Or maybe you guys can answer this for me because it's a conundrum that there's going to be hungry people in China now. And what are we doing about it? What can be done about it initially? Are they going to eat that stock feed? The food recycle process, this is what I saw as the positives out of it. It's environmentally sound, socially acceptable, consumer palatable because of the unique branding. It's going to pick up a market very, very quickly. Abundant supply, we've got so much food out there. If we can, as I was saying this morning, what's your vision for this in terms of volumes and timeline? How much are we going to be able to capture and get into the marketplace? Because it's just open-ended, and then you're looking internationally as well. I'm only thinking Australia, but you're looking internationally. Rapidly growing segment. It is certainly, these niche markets are rapidly growing. You saw the free-range eggs going up and up and up and up, and the specialties are going up and up and up, starting from a low base, so huge room for expansion with these specialty ones. And biosecure, so we've understood that we put a lot of effort into biosecurity, so I'm confident that there should be no biosecurity risks once we got this process up and commercialised. Okay, so that's all I had.